Today, I'd like to discuss a topic that very few have ever really gone into in detail, and it's the issue of going native. The various degrees that you can go when it comes to interacting and assimilating into another country. Now, there are some pros and cons, and we'll go over that here. And I'll comment on my own particular views and opinions. But keep in mind, those are just my opinions. You have to find what works for you. And as you'll see, that has a little bit to do with how much money you have and what your primary goals are beyond just being in another country and possibly finding a new relationship. So let's go ahead and get into this. Now, when it comes to the phrase going native, you may have seen the movie Dances with Wolves, and Kevin Costner ends up becoming a part of this Native American tribe to the degree that he now finds himself identifying more with them than with the frontiersman life that he originally came from. This is what we could call full immersion. And I've chatted with guys over the years since 2012, and they have gone this route, full immersion. And they're somewhat proud of the fact that they don't hang around expats at all. And I can understand that. As I've talked about in other videos, many of the problems you will have will be with other expats, not with local Filipinos. And so the full immersion guys, they move to the Philippines and they choose to specifically live out in the province and live a lifestyle that is similar to those around them in the province, which is a very modest lifestyle. Now, here's the thing I've noticed over the years. The guys that have chosen to do this, I can't think of one of them who could afford anything more than that. So it's not like they had plenty of money for a really nice house in the province, but they chose to live in a very substandard, unfinished, two-bedroom home out in the province that wasn't weather sealed, didn't have air conditioning. Sometimes the chickens would get in the house. They were usually doing this out of financial constraint. It was the most that they could afford. And mentally, they just simply told themselves, I'm happy with this. I'm content with this. I like this lifestyle. And that's not a bad way to go. I mean, you have to be happy with the options available to you. I get that. And if they're happy with those sort of inconveniences and lack of luxuries, it's a good thing that they have mentally been able to adjust to that sort of lifestyle. But I always have to question myself, if this guy suddenly came into a windfall of money, would he stay in that lifestyle? I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts he wouldn't. Because I know plenty of other guys who live in the province, but they're living in a very nice Western construction quality home. They've got everything from high-speed internet to great air conditioning, nice appliances, hot water, backup electrical system, CCTVs, swimming pool. They're living in the province, but they're really not living like most of the locals in the province. Now, don't get me wrong. You ride your motorbike around the province, and every once in a while, maybe one out of every 20, 30 homes, you'll see a rich Filipino in a very nice home. In fact, there was one I saw not too long ago. It was definitely a mansion. That place it was sitting on about 4 or 5 acres of land, and the home was huge. It had to have at least 10 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. I mean, it was just gigantic. There's a couple others I can think of that I've seen out in the province, amazing homes. But we're talking about guys who, again, they go full immersion. They don't have the hot water. They don't have air conditioning. They run the electricity as little as possible. When evening comes, you might find them hanging out at the little kamalig, a little bamboo hut where all the guys will congregate and just sort of pass the time, either with chismes or a little bit of drinking, play some dominoes, and that's their entertainment. And they only hang out with Filipinos. Now, one of the benefits is that by being fully immersed, they learn the local language very well after some time goes by. So they got that going for them. They also find themselves much more accepted in their local barangay, their local community, which can give you a sense of better safety or security or support should something come up and you needed to rely on your neighbors. So those are some benefits there. However, there are some downsides as well. The more interactions you have with locals, the more chances there are that you're going to have a disagreement or a problem with locals. And that can get pretty ugly in any country, but here, suffice it to say, things can escalate pretty darn quickly. Many times when I was living in the province of Bohol, out in the middle of nowhere with no scooter, I would pass by the local barangay guys as they were playing dominoes and drinking, and they would invite me over, but I was on my way. I had to walk a good 45 minutes to get to town to buy groceries, and I always politely declined, and eventually they just stopped asking because I saw it as a no-win situation. Number one, I don't know how to play dominoes, so I would probably lose money because they were betting on the games. Now, if I did learn dominoes and became good at it and took their money, well, that's not going to go over well either. So a no-win situation, which is why I simply abstain. Now, next, you've got on the very other end of the spectrum, what I would call the minimal immersion guys. Now, these are the expats that move to the Philippines and live in what's called here like a walled garden. They will live in literally a walled, planned community that is usually occupied by mostly expats and a lot of richer Filipinos. These are homes that go for anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 US. There's security at the front gate. There's a swimming pool, a gym. The streets that go throughout the housing community are well maintained, along with the landscaping. The security patrols around at night. But that is not your typical Filipino lifestyle. These are gated communities where you're really only going to interact with the neighbors that you choose to interact with, the people you invite over for a barbecue or dinner, much like in the United States, or at least in California. I've had times in California where I lived there a whole year, never talked to my neighbors one time, and they didn't want to talk to me. Everybody just kept to themselves. And part of this minimal immersion approach, a lot of these guys, you will never see them eating in a place where the locals would eat. You're not going to see them having street food or barbecue. The minimal immersion guys will either cook all their meals at home if the Filipina they married has learned how to cook Western food, or it's their regular habit to go to the mall or the nicer restaurants where they can get international food. Might be Italian, American, whatever, but they have no interest in trying out Filipino foods of any kind. They simply will not venture into what the locals eat. Now, the upside to this sort of approach is that living in these sort of gated communities, you've got a pretty high expectation of security. Chances are very low that you're going to get robbed. You could lock up your house, go take a trip abroad or domestically, come back 2 months later, and you will not find a squatter has taken over your house. Why? Because there's a lot of security there. It's walled in all the way around. That sort of thing just is highly unlikely to happen. So you can pretty much have the benefit of knowing that your stuff will be safe, and you will be safe. Plus, you got the swimming pool, the gym, a real parking spot for your car. So those are some benefits. As far as downside, well, it is a little more expensive. And if you're not going to cook for yourself, eating fast food or restaurant food still comes down to eating a lot of processed food, which is bad for your health. So that's not good. And in general, the only interaction you might have with local Filipinos is when you're at the mall or sitting in a movie theater with them. So for some people, that's a great thing. For other people, it kind of defeats the purpose of being in a different country. Now, finally, there's the third group, which I guess I would call the intermediate immersion people. I count myself in that group. In my 12 years so far living in the Philippines, I have spent so much of that living in the province, living in the smaller cities, living in the big cities. I have walked the streets in all of those locations. I have ridden my bike in all those locations. I have had plenty of conversations with local Filipinos, just idle chit chat, sometimes some decent conversations, like when I met some of the faculty there at Silliman College. And so I've had sort of a middle of the road balanced approach to interacting with the Philippines. Nobody can really look at me and say that I have assimilated to the degree that, say, Kyle Jennerman has. Some of you may know him as Kuya from Becoming Filipino. He would be more on the full immersion end of the spectrum. But my approach has been to be more in the middle. I have had many close relationships with Filipino women, but I would say that in 12 years, I've only had sort of a friendship with maybe 3 Filipino men. And like I said, one was one of the teachers there at Silliman College. Another was a guy that I got to know. I met him out at the boardwalk in Dumaguete. We were both into Tai Chi. He was much further along in it than I was. So for a couple of months, I would just meet him at the park and he would let me shadow him as he did his morning routine. But I never went to his house or anything else like that. But that was about the extent of our friendship. As for food, I've been pretty open-minded. I've tried out almost all of the major dishes. And as I've mentioned before, there are dishes, Filipino dishes I like, but I don't eat them because it doesn't fit into my carnivore diet. There's too much pasta involved, or bread, or sugar. But I do love, and I do cook at home, or my wife will cook it, various Filipino dishes such as adobo, sinigang soup, kangkong with pork, sisig. I love those dishes. So I'm open. Like I said, it has to fit into my diet. Now, other things I've just chosen to not really try out. I'm not into balut. I'm not into the various grilled organs and intestines, although I do love grilled fish, grilled pork, grilled chicken. I'll eat that at the drop of a hat. And I have eaten at so many roadsides after 5 p.m. I love barbecued street food. Now, as far as amenities, like I said, I have lived out in the province. I lived in a home out in the outskirts of Bohol. I had no screen door. I had no screens on the window. I had no air conditioning. I had no hot water. I cooked with a propane tank. It was not uncommon that I would see very large 6-inch geckos or tucos, lizards, crawling around the ceiling at night, lapping up the various bugs that would hang out near the light bulb. I dealt with mosquitoes and all the other critters that come along with living in the province. I've done that, and it was a good experience. But I have spent the majority of my time in the Philippines enjoying a certain level of Western amenities and comforts. Can I get by without aircon if the power goes out? Yeah, I can do it for about a day. And if it's going to go any longer, I book a hotel that has a generator. Same thing if the water goes out. I like having a mid to full size fridge available so that I can have plenty of raw food to do my cooking. I like having a very nice kitchen with everything I need. Now, I haven't since the 80s. I don't bother with watching television. That's never been a part of my lifestyle. If I want entertainment, I'll go to Netflix pick out a movie with no commercials and watch it. Or my wife and I will jump on the bike, go to the movie theater, and see a movie we want to see. But I just don't have time with all the other things I want to do to just sit there and watch 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day of mindless programming. But I understand some guys, they got to have their Western cable. They got to see the sports programming. I get that. And that's part of what I would consider the intermediate immersion amenity to be included. So to wrap it up, I would say you need to figure out which one of these levels of immersion appeals to you the most. I'm not here to say, well, this one's the only good way, the other ways are bad ways. I'm just here to kind of put it before you and let you decide. Do you want to be completely isolated from the surroundings of the Philippines and enjoy the walled garden experience? Well, then seek that out. There are places like that out in Clark City, Manila, Cebu. You can find that. Maybe not on the smaller islands, but you can find it. If you want to be fully immersed and truly live like the locals, cooking with basically the ingredients that are available at the local wet market, forego the air conditioning, keep your electric bill low, interact with the neighbors in the barangay on a daily basis. If you want to do all that and learn the local language fluently, if that's what makes you happy, do that. And as I said before, myself, I'm more of a middle of the road, intermediate immersion kind of guy. I have plenty of social interaction with my wife, my close friends, my friends, acquaintances, and viewers that I meet from the channel. My social calendar is full. I really don't want to be deeply involved with my neighbors because when it comes to somebody that lives that close, I prefer to have my privacy. That's me. Maybe you feel different, but that's just how I live. That's just how I do it. I'd be interested in hearing what you prefer there in the comments. What appeals to you and why? As I've said so many times before, when you know what you want, it makes it easier to find it.